Beatrice. When one stops to consider Beatrice as the lady next door, with whom the young Dante would be hopelessly in love, it's enough to read his words to understand that such an identification is nonsensical as well as blasphemous. We are right in the middle of the Middle Ages. Young Werther was yet to come. When in a film set of ancient Rome, we see a centurion with a wristwatch, we are advised immediately that it is an anachronism, but not when we are presented with the romantic love of Dante and Beatrice. Page 210. Page 210. We also need to remember the iron rule of medieval rhetoric that referred to one's own biographical detail. In fact, Dante doesn't speak about either his wife or his children. Why should he ever have wanted to speak about a youthful love for a girl who then married someone else? It's true that he often speaks of Beatrice as a woman of flesh and bone, but he also does that with the gentlewoman with whom he is enamored after Beatrice's death, only to clearly say of the latter, if one wants to understand who this lady is, she is philosophy. In Beatrice's case, unfortunately, he never says what she represents. Perhaps he couldn't say it. All the poets of the time, Provençals, Sicilian, and Tuscan, sang of love for a woman often never even seen, but always loved ardently, and for whom they were prepared to sacrifice their lives. How is it possible not to comprehend that it is always and only about a beautiful lie? The first to name Bice Portinari was the famous Boccaccio, who had a deep admiration for Dante. It was he who added divine to the original title of the comedy, and certainly had understood the depth of the spiritual message in it. Monarchy was condemned in 1329 and publicly burnt. Boccaccio was 60 years old. The suspicion that Dante was a heretic circulated, and doubtless Boccaccio was aware of it and knew that it wasn't unfounded. What better strategy than to divert suspicion from the Divine Comedy and save it from burning, of an unhappy love story for a Bice Portinari who was actually living in Florence at that time? Who knows, perhaps we owe it to this invention of Boccaccio that we can read and enjoy this masterpiece today. But I wonder, until when will we be content with this hoax, without opening our eyes to what Beatrice really signified? Beatrice truly is the character key of the whole Dantean work, not just the comedy. On the fact that she had a symbolic import, all agree. But what does she signify? The greater number of commentators opt for sacred knowledge. For others, it is faith or philosophy beyond theology, and for some, even orthodox religion. Page 211. Let's see how Dante defines her. Beatrice is a lady of heaven. Beatrice descends from the heavens to speak to Virgil, and then to meet Dante on the summit of purgatory. Dante takes him up into the heavens. It is she who in paradises my mind. Beatrice is she who light between truth and intellect will be. So Beatrice seems to be essentially an intermediary between God and man, or better, between God and Dante. In the banquet, something very particular is said by Beatrice that corresponds fully to a typical belief of the Cathars about which we have already spoken, and that is that the spirit is split between a part remaining in heaven and another imprisoned on earth. That blessed Beatrice who lives in heaven with the angels and on earth with my soul. This is Catharism. Expounding the doctrines of the Cathars, we have seen that the half remaining in heaven acts like a guardian and guide to the half imprisoned in the body. It is the guardian angel. That Beatrice performs the function of guide for Dante's soul is beyond discussion, but the use of the verb maintain is interesting in the prayer addressed to Beatrice, and it is the only occurrence in the poem. Do, in me, maintain your splendor, so that my soul, which you have healed, remain as you like it until it unwinds from the body. Paradise 31, 88 to 90. The figure of the guardian angel comes from Iranian Zoroastrianism, where it designates, as in Manichaeism and Catharism, the heavenly counterpart of the individual that follows it on its way, guarding it from the dangers of earthly experience and guiding it towards its spiritual realization. One could object that this figure is also present in the Catholic world, but it was only introduced in the Middle Ages and very probably came from Catholicism itself. Besides, it is substantially different, even if the function is similar. It is something apart, not part of one's own spirit. Page 212. Beatrice represents, to my thinking, exactly this: the part of Dante's spirit that remained in heaven and functions as guardian and guide. Perhaps it's opportune to remember that she has appeared before at the beginning of the poem. It is she who solicits Virgil to go to his aid. Sure, it's a poetic fiction, but it corresponds fully to a belief of the Cathars, according to which both halves yearn for a reconciliation. The half in heaven is fully aware of it. The other, imprisoned in the vegetative and sensory part of the soul, which is the body, was often forgetful of its divine origin, but if it were awakened from its sleep of oblivion, could only wish for a return to its heavenly land. And Dante speaks of sleep at the beginning of the poem. I cannot clearly say how I had entered the wood. I was so full of sleep just at the point where I had abandoned the true path. Hell 1, 10-12. With the consolamentum comes the longed-for reconciliation of the two parts, following which the spirit imprisoned in man would return to heaven, guided in its ascent by its heavenly half. In Cathar testimonies, this return to the realm of the Father is described as an ascent through the seven heavens. All this corresponds exactly to what Dante is doing. He is united with Beatrice at the end of purgatory, and from there ascends with her through the heavens.